Hello, my name is Jaden Hewitt. This is discussion 7 for KIN 610 with Aaron McNary. So for this discussion, I'm answering a couple of questions. First, starting with the main points of the articles that we read, and I'm going to start back to front instead, and start with the last one, and it's the sports security trends and technology solutions. So basically, in that one, it's talking about some of the different ways that risk assessment and mitigation efforts have been done with surveillance and other things like that, and taking courses and things like that. But one of the things that stuck out to me in that one was the possible usage of like drones as a safety precaution. I understand the possible usage of that, but it is an interesting path. I think with everybody's fear of mass surveillance and drones in this day and age. So it is surely an interesting article to read and get an idea of where things are headed, or where they want them to go. The next article will be the sporting events as targets, the increasingly scary reality. That one essentially is talking about a lot of the attacks that have happened. So one being the obviously, we're looking at 9/11 as one, but that wasn't necessarily a sporting event, but that kind of increased security around the events, and that's another mass point. But also even like the Boston Marathon bombing, a very unfortunate event. But in the grand scheme of the article, it's talking about how sports has become this kind of, it's transcended just a game, and now it is a place where a lot of people gather, and it is a place to make a political statement for some people, in terms of making an attack or what may you have, or making a terrorist threat or whatever it may be. So that is the basis of that article, just kind of going through various examples of that and why it's happened, and how people can potentially avoid that, although I think it is hard to avoid it if it wants to be done. So I guess just mitigating and knowing how to manage damage when that is happening. And then the last one is the 5 cybersecurity lessons learned from the Super Bowl. I thought that one was really interesting. I think it was just generally interesting to read, learning about how often cyber attacks happen, and the stance companies take, and essentially saying like, we're gonna have it happen to us, but how can we again mitigate this damage instead of making it a large scale. And I think that it was interesting to read about when they're talking about offense being their best defense. Obviously, that's a sport tactic, especially in football. If you put up 70 points, very hard for anybody to score 70 points, as bad as your defense may be, especially if you have time of possession. But I don't want to go too in the weeds there. But anyway, I think generally it's interesting, and I would be curious to see like what their offense is. Like I guess I would be more curious to do a little bit more research and see like what that means. And but I think it again was interesting to see that like they know it's going to happen, and it's just like working together as a team to make sure the biggest assets are protected and everything like that. So very interesting article. And then I think the most pressing issues based on chapter 15, I would say the biggest thing would be, to me, would be like unruly fans, whether it's due to alcohol or drug usage or whatever it may be. That would be one of my most pressing issues, especially in today's political climate. I think that any additives to what could make somebody angry is not a good thing, because I think at the end of the day, people are agreeing less and less and disagreeing far more. And that might even come to sports, and that's made its way into sports. So I think looking at that, that's one of the biggest issues, I think, because it's in most pressing issues, because it's more consistent and probable to happen. And then obviously, like, large scale attacks would be the scariest and most pressing issue, I feel like, in terms of like how your systems are set up and how you're managing damage and mitigating damage, and then having your security precautions and your responses in place. I think that takes a lot of planning, and maybe a little bit less planning than say a drunk fan getting into a fight, because that is a large scale operation. So I selected those issues just because I think that they're kind of the same but in opposite scales, and that was, to me, very interesting to look at. And then the second question, should the industry change? I don't think the industry should change its ways. I think it just can continue to improve its ways, and get better at risk assessment. And obviously, like, surveillance is obviously something that we want to try to avoid on a large scale. We want people to feel comfortable, but also at the same time, if we can use surveillance in a way that isn't super invasive, in order to mitigate damage at events specifically, I think that's a good thing. And maybe even working with local law enforcement and FBI and things like that. So I think that looking at how events are run, I think that they do a good job. I don't necessarily think it should change. I think when something horrible happens, obviously it's going to happen. I don't think there's much you can do to put that fire out before it even happens. And when it does, it's obviously a great success. But again, as good as the federal government is, and the FBI is, and all of the agencies are, and everything like that, as good as they are at finding risk and stopping it before it happens, at the end of the day, it just is going to happen at some point. It's just about having the right precautions in place to make sure that the damage doesn't get to a point where it could, and it has in the past. And I think that having quick responses and making sure that we're all on top of it. I think there's a lot of at sporting events, there's like high schoolers working there, and there's people that may not fully care about their jobs, and that's understandable, but they definitely should be thrown in a little bit more responsibility with risk assessment and everything like that, in terms of like taking courses and things like that, because I think it's everybody's job when you're working at an event to make sure that your eyes are peeled and everybody's safe. So